Welcome to CK4RC.
You ever farted so loud you had to catch your breath afterwards? Whew. Hey, welcome back to CK4RC. Yeah, we're back. So let's do it. I've got the good old Element Enduro24 Trailrunner on the bench today. And we're going to do a little bit of a build, a very modest build, because to be quite honest with you, this thing's not worth a big build. And also, the aftermarket it's not really there to support a big build for these things. What I'm going to do is I got some scissors over here. I'm going to trim up this super annoying body line. Whoop! Gotcha. I pointed this out in the review video, the way that the fender flares stop right here and stop right here. And there's a body line, literally, that runs between the two of them. I'm going to cut the excess off down there. I don't know why they designed it that way. That's just terrible. So I'm going to snip those off and give it the good old snip. You know what I mean? So we'll start with that. And if you will also remember, one of the things that is one of the big drawbacks of this frame-mounted servo is the servo horn hits this giant pumpkin right here whenever it goes kind of head-on compression. And if you notice, so see how it hits right there, but watch side to side. See how much more flex you get whenever it's not head-on. So here's hitting, right? And then look how much more travel there is side to side. So I have an assortment of spacers right here that I am going to select a couple of spacers just to lift this servo up ever so slightly so that the servo horn down here is not hitting that pumpkin and just get a little more suspension travel. Speaking of suspension, I am going to replace, hopefully, I am going to attempt to replace these stock shocks with some good old Enduro double barrel telescoping shocks. And I think that that'll give me a little bit more travel and just a little bit better suspension right there. And then I've got an Element Enduro24 brass skid plate. So I'm going to replace that as well. And then again, just for the modest hop up, I'm going to take these tiny little tires. I think these things might have been 44, 46 millimeters whenever I had my calipers out and tested them before. So I'm going to swap them out with some slightly larger tires. Now, these are not anything special. These are seriously just kind of cheapo, stock, RTR, glued on wheels and tires. So there's no weight here. I will probably end up getting some brass ring inserts to put in the back of these just to add a little bit of heft and weight. But I don't currently have those on hand right now. Down the road, that's probably what will happen. But as you can see, give just a little bit more height and hopefully bring that pumpkin a little bit further off the ground. So that way I can get a better ride height, better ground clearance. Not the best tread, not the best tire, but what's on here isn't all that great either. They're actually not bad tires. The size is just comical for a 24 scale. Element, no, why? And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this 1S battery. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to run 2S on this thing because I know it can. It comes with 1S. It's labeled for 1S, but I've seen it done multiple times. I'm going to run 2S on this thing. And when it's all said and done, I still have a stock Enduro24 Trailrunner right over here on my shelf. So I'll be able to compare the modestly hopped up trail runner versus the box stock trail runner and just see what these little things do. So along the way, I will probably break this video up a little bit, maybe throw in a how-to with, you know, the skid plate or the shocks or something like that. But I will keep you guys along for the ride, just so you can see how things are going. And then we'll do a test run at the end compared to the box stock and see if it was worth the time and effort or not. So I'm going to flip this camera around. I'm going to reposition myself on the bench, and we're going to get to work. All right, so first up on the agenda is probably the easiest and least consequential mod that I'll be doing on this little build. I'm going to trim this dumb part of the body down here because it shouldn't even be there. Not happy that Element did this. So I've got my good old Lexan scissors that I am going to use to trim this little weird little body line right here. And I'm also going to note that use whatever tools you have available to you. It might be a hobby knife, might be a Dremel tool, might be a utility knife like a box cutter. If that is what you have to work with, then go for it. I have these handy Lexan body scissors, and so that's what I'm going to use because why wouldn't I? That's specifically what they're made for. And then looky there, that dumb body line is gone, just like that. So now that body, it just looks better. And what? It took a minute. I already did this side. Honestly, I just wanted to see how well the scissors cut through the body, and they worked great. So no complaints there. Body, donezo. Next up, I'm going to look at raising this servo a little bit. Now I've got a selection of spacers that I can kind of go through, and I have not looked at the diameter of any of these spacers or of the hardware that is attaching this servo to the frame. So what I'm going to do, it does look like Phillips head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my trusty Phillips screwdriver, and I'm going to get this servo taken off real quick. You know what? I better grab my magnets. Trying to learn from my mistakes over here, folks. Last time, I didn't do that. And then I just had stuff just flopping all over the place. Looky here, huh? Live and you learn. And I am actually learning. There we go. It's tricky to do this on camera whenever I need to make sure that I'm watching what I'm doing, but I also want it to be on camera so you guys can see what I'm doing. Because otherwise, how's it even like a how-to tutorial kind of thing? Huh? That wire's in the way just a little bit, but not too bad. Not enough to keep me from getting in there. So there we go. And it is zip tied to the frame. If I really wanted to, I could probably clip that zip tie, have a little bit more freedom. I didn't disconnect it down here, so I've got to be careful how far I'm tugging on this thing because it is still connected to the steering link. So I don't want to break the servo horn or the steering link or pop anything out of place. So yeah, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at putting just a moderately sized spacer right here and lift this servo just a little bit. See how far below the frame it sits whenever it's attached? If I can lift it up to here, that will give me all the suspension travel that I need. So with that in mind, I'm going to pause for just a second and I'm going to sort through these off camera just so you don't have to sit here and go through this, and I will be back in just a moment. All right, so what I did here was I went through some spacers and I found some that were about the right height, but not quite the right diameter. So I kept looking and I found some that were about the right height and also were the right diameter. So I used those. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know um, where these spacers came from. I'm pretty sure they came in some microcrawler hardware kit. So if you just kind of do a quick search for that, I'm sure you'll be able to find something very similar. So I went ahead and I got these installed, and I had to use my good old inverted tweezers. I really like these things because they just kind of work as kind of tiny little clamps, and you can just kind of clamp onto things and just use these to kind of hold things in place without having to concentrate on how much pressure you're applying, because the tool can just do the work. So if you look right here, look how much difference there is between the servo mount and the frame where it was mounted before. Look how much space is between there. I mean, literally, I got my tweezers in here and clamped them on to the spacer, and I can just leave them there. That's how much space there is. That's crazy. And if you'll remember, that servo horn, it was pretty much like completely sticking down below the frame to where that axle just, it hit it so much. Look how much more suspension travel there is. Now there's still more side to side flex, which fine, that's fine. If I get kind of, off camber, is that what it's called? Off, whatever, off balance, then the axle still has some extra travel that it can kind of offset and stabilize itself. So I am completely fine that it's not full extension right here in the middle. The fact that I've got so much more travel is going to make a huge difference. Well, the one drawback to doing this is, yes, it does raise the weight that much more on the front of this rig. It does mess with the center of gravity a little bit. The fact that I'm swapping out the tires for bigger tires also is going to mess with the center of gravity. But I think that the modifications that I'm making, I think it's going to offset the higher center of gravity to be able to have a higher ground clearance and be able to attack more obstacles. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there, but I think it's worth it. So I am going to move on to these shocks and work on the shocks and the tires, and this little build is just moving right along. So let's see where we go from here. Well, the bad news is I did find something a little obnoxious with these shocks, specifically the way they're mounted. So we've got the good old Phillips head screw up top, but then we've got this hex ball joint, ball nut thing down here that the bottom shock mount clips onto, and then you can see it runs through the suspension link and into the axle. And I did take this and I unscrewed the top and I popped this thing off, but of course the aftermarket shock that I was wanting to replace it with won't fit on here. Now the good news is that the Endura double barrel telescopic shocks that I was wanting to replace this with is the same length, and they're both friction dampener shocks. So I'm not really losing out on any performance. So what I did do was, as you can see, the shocks were mounted in the middle shock mount. So I did move them to the innermost shock mount just to give myself tiny bit more articulation and flex. Won't make a huge difference, but it's better than how it was stock. So with that, I did go ahead and put the wheels on. So I'll get this last one started as well. Just wanted to show you where the progress stood with the shock real quick. So that was a bummer, but doesn't look like I'm going to be out anything other than just a brand name aftermarket shock. So no big deal there. And this video has gotten a little bit longer than I expected. So I'm actually going to break right here, and I'm going to do a how-to video on replacing the skid plate on this, because while yes, this is a specific brass skid plate for this specific rig, there are some universal truths with skid plates, and so I'll do that in its own separate how-to video, and then I'm going to come back and show you the finished product after that how-to video, And along with that, we will do the test run. We'll compare it to its brother, the stock Enduro 24 that's over there on the shelf, just off screen. So we'll do that. Before you go, don't forget to hit the quadfecta down here, like, share, comment, and subscribe. And go to onlyrcs.com. Use my discount code. I'm going to drop that below as well, CK4RC, to get 20% off your whole order. And that's where the truck stands. So thanks for coming back. I will see you guys soon. Keep doing RC stuff, and I'll see you.